You want to tell them how we met, Jack?
Yeah, well, I kind of knew you through mutual people. We both have a friend who lives down in Patchogue. We're both into cars, so cars in a way kind of brought us together. I actually reached out to him because I had been following, Steven on Instagram for a long time, and I saw that, he did real estate and stuff like that, and I had been trying to save up as much money as I could for just various purposes, and I was thinking about investing in real estate, doing like a huge leverage deal, something that would put me into debt. And I reached out, we spoke for an hour. He was probably like, who the hell is this kid who wants to speak to me, I was basically doing something that he would advise me against, putting myself into debt. We spoke last week. He had me read David Ramsey's book about how to not accumulate debt, and completely changed my mind within a week. So I look forward to speaking more about the college end of it, yes. But that's essentially how we met.
So what school were you going to, and how'd you get into it? What were you going for? You want to kind of tell them?
I went to Comac High School, so I'm a little bit further out. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was in high school, what I wanted to do as a career. I kind of like my mind shifted every moment. I was always trying to do a different thing every week. I wasn't really paying attention to colleges, but when it got to that point where I had to get my head focused, the school kind of pushed me towards big brand schools, right? So I ended up going to NYU for filmmaking, so film and television. That was one of the things I was considering, that versus business. But I was kind of faced with this decision based on how my grades were, that I could either go to a school like Suffolk Community College, Farmingdale, or I could go, for business, because that's what my grades could afford. Or I could go to NYU, where the grades didn't have to be as high for filmmaking. And I chose that because I thought that would be more important, and that name would get me.
The brand name of NYU.
I thought that would pull me further than doing something that I, would be more versatile. You
were going to NYU, right? And then what happened?
So currently I'm in my second year, so my fourth semester. I went my first year through NYU. It was kind of not exactly what I expected. It did not live up to the hype, I could tell you that much. It was kind of like something I worked into my mindset that I had to enjoy it. But every single time that bill came, boy, it was just super upsetting. But now, halfway through, I would say my third semester, so my sophomore year, the pandemic was hitting, I was online, I was at home, and I was just like, this is not what I like. I was falling out of love with what they were teaching me, and I realized it just was not worth what I was doing. So I decided to look for other options, possibly take a gap semester from school, possibly try something different. My parents wanted me to stay in school, so I started looking for a different option. I found Farmingdale. That's where I'm at. This is my first semester right now.
He went from the big, luxurious, big brand name school of NYU, which is where I was supposed to go, right? That's in the shiny lights in New York City, and everything's exciting. There's a lot of energy, and it sounds like it's worth the money. But you were basically going there, and I remember when he and I sat down, what'd you tell me about what they were teaching you, about what the teachers were essentially doing?
I quickly found, especially once I got to Farmingdale, that the educations come solely from textbooks, from online resources that, I was seeing that I was buying textbooks for possibly $200. Mm-hmm. And my teachers were just telling me what pages to read in the textbooks. I'm like, I'm paying $38,000 a semester for a $200 book, and somebody to tell me where to read it. So that was just that was something that I kind of didn't really understand about college. And I went to Farmingdale, and it was kind of the same thing.
But much cheaper.
But much, much cheaper.
I remember we were talking, and how difficult was the conversation with your parents when you said, hey, Mom, Dad, here I am at NYU, which Mom and Dad are probably super proud of, but I'm deciding to go to Farmingdale, which is a nowhere near as prestigious school. It's much cheaper. And what was that conversation like and their feelings?
I had been building up, I would say, for a while, just not really happy where I was at NYU. And I had been very scared to talk to my parents about it because I knew that they were very proud of it. They had told their friends. There were a lot of people kind of riding on like, oh, Jack is going to be this famous director. He's going to NYU. So it was definitely scary. I spoke to my parents and they didn't take it too well at first. They didn't like the idea because I presented to them that, I would take like a gap semester to figure things out because I was just all over the place. I really didn't know, and I still don't know what I want to do in terms of my career. So it was kind of upsetting to be locked into something. We came to the compromise. I said, maybe I'll go to like a state school, just try to figure things out instead of, taking a gap semester or a gap year. But it was definitely not a single conversation. The first one didn't go too well. That was, an hour of trying to tell them, like, I don't think it's right. We even got to the point with, where they were like, okay, so you drop out of NYU, where do you go? So it was not an easy process, and the stigma between them, my friends, and just other people in the community was difficult, but I knew where my head was at, and I kind of was realizing through that year and a half that I was at NYU what trouble I was going to be putting myself in. So it was kind of like, I was there. I was so happy to be there. I signed up to be an admissions ambassador where I give tours to students, and I was just repping everything, right? I wore purple every single day. I was there, and I kind of felt like I was living it, but every single day I would just get home and like the coursework, like I was just like reading out of a textbook, and I kept thinking to myself, because my mind's always kind of been a little, has been very business minded. I'm just like, yeah, I'm kind of like living up to the hype, but from like a standpoint of like, what am I actually getting for what I'm spending? And just that whole part of it just didn't make sense to me. I kept saying to myself, yeah, it's NYU, but like, would this experience really be anything different anywhere else? And then the whole quarantine and coronavirus, it brought me home. It separated me from, kind of the hype of NYU and the people there, and brought me down to the reality of like, okay, this is like an education. And once I started comparing with all my other friends, who most of them are actually at Suffolk, and we weren't doing really different things. We were taking very similar classes, having very similar experiences, because a lot of my friends went to Suffolk for film too. If anything, what they were doing that I wasn't doing is they were getting jobs that were at home, right? And they were making networks here where they wanted to stay. And I knew that I was going to be that. I liked being in New York City, but like I always like kind of felt like Long Island was still my home. So like I came home, and during quarantine, they all had jobs. They all had these connections around here, and I almost felt like I was behind. Going to NYU, I was behind my friends who were going to Suffolk. Doesn't that sound crazy, right?
It's nuts.
It's crazy, but that's how I felt.